Hello everybody and welcome back to the InTouch Machine Edition training video series. Today's video is an animation overview and you're going to find out just the basic uses of the animations available in InTouch Machine Edition. Upon completion of this course you should be able to at least understand somewhat and locate the command animation, the hyperlink, bar graph, text data link, color, visibility and position, resize, and rotation animations. We're going to do a little bit with each one of those today. So I'll come back to this slide in just a second. And for those of you who are watching these videos kind of out of sequence, we started a few videos ago building on an existing application. While you certainly don't have to go through all of the videos, and you're more than welcome to just pursue this video. It will help if you go back to the videos. I believe Screen Groups is the one where we started to build on an application. So what we've done is we've created some screen groups that pull in multiple screens, and we're going to build on that here. I'm going to open up the template screen and place a couple of symbols on the screen because we're going to be doing some animations. I'm going to double click here on symbols. That's under the graphics tab. I'm going to move down to sliders and I'm going to grab a horizontal slider here, slider 7, and I'm going to place that up here in the upper left hand corner of the screen, and then I'm going to grab another slider which is more of a vertical one, slider 4. And then I'm going to make a copy of this. Now, as mentioned in previous videos, I could right click and hit copy. I could do the Control C and Control V, or I can select it, hold the Control key down on my keyboard, and then drag and drop it. So that's a little bit easier to do. We're going to do some moving of things around on the screen, so we're going to need to be able to change an X value and a Y value, so that's what I'm going to use these for. I want to make some new tags in here called X val for X value, and that's going to be an integer tag, and so will the Y value. I'm going to leave those at 0 to 100, just be easier to understand that way. And then I'm going to make this one, eventually we're going to rotate some things, so I'm going to make a tag called ROT for short for rotate. And I'm going to also make that an integer and allow that to go from 0 to 100. So there's a setup of that. Now I open up the template screen. I'm going to need to save this as, so I'm going to go up to the little Wonderware logo here, hit save as, and we'll save this as animation overview. Save, and so that's saved as that, and then I need a way to get to it, so I'm going to open up my navigation screen. I'm going to copy this button down here and double click on it, and we'll rename it. First of all, we'll make it go to the animation overview screen, and then we'll go back and relabel it animation overview. Okay, so that should allow us to get to that screen. We'll save changes. And let's see. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through all these different animations here. And again, this video is just an overview. There will be a more in-depth video that covers these in more detail, but we're going to go through each one of these, and the first one that we're going to do is the command animation. Now the command animation allows you to do things like touches and presses with either a touch screen, a mouse, even keyboard for that matter. And a lot of people will put these initially on the button object, but they don't have to be on a button object. If you notice here, once I selected or dropped the button object on the screen, then some of these became available. They were grayed out before. The command, the hyperlink, the color, position and visibility, the resize are all available. You can't make a button a bar graph, text data link, or a rotation animation. So just FYI, it's a good idea to understand which ones you can and can't do. You can always look in the help system, but I find it just easier to grab an object, and let's say if I put a circle down, okay, I can do all these. I can't rotate a circle, but you can see how that works. So here on the button, and I'm not illustrating the button at this point, I'm really going to illustrate the command animation. I can apply the command animation by clicking on this, and notice it becomes highlighted. You can think of these as like check boxes. So if I want to apply, let's say, a hyperlink, a color, all these different animations, and I brought this up in a previous video, you can see that this is the button object and those 4 different animations are applied to that. When you can think of these like check boxes, so I can toggle these or uncheck these, if you will, and remove those animations from that object. So that's how you turn those on and turn those off. And let's see. So we're going to get started. One other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to display these values. Now I could do this with a text box, a text object. But an alternative way to do that is to use the caption field inside of a rectangle. And I think we did this in the header screen with some of the status. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put that X value, and I'm going to label this, and then inside of curly brackets I'm going to put that tag, and then Y val, and inside of curly brackets I'll put that tag, and last but not least the rotate. And just so we make this very visible, we'll just increase this font from 10 point. We'll jump it up to 20 point font. Make sure we have enough room here. There we go. So now we can see those values very easily. All right, the first thing that we're going to do here is just some basics. Now here on the command animation, I double clicked on that. I already had the command animation applied to that. The basics of this are you can determine what this is going to do on down or click while it's down, or on release or on up of this button or this object in this case. And then in each case you have the ability to use the built-in scripting language, VB script. You can open a screen, close a screen, set a tag, reset a tag, which set a tag is basically set it to 1, reset is set it to 0, or toggle a tag, whatever. If it's 0 or 1, make it the opposite. In this example, I'm going to use the built-in language, and in this case, on down, what we're going to do is we're going to increment the X value here. Now the way that the built-in scripting language works, and there's several different places or interfaces where you can use this throughout InTouch Machine Edition, but the basic idea is it evaluates this field, the expression column, and then writes the result back into this tag name. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the X value, and this is not case sensitive, and I'm going to increase this by 1 or add 1 to that, and then write it back into itself. So xval equals xval plus 1. So whatever it is, add 1 to it and then write it back into itself, and that's going to be done in the on down condition. So let's go back to the button and label this, and we'll call this increment xval. And now when we save this, so I'm going to close this, save this, and let me double check mentally here. I gave myself a navigation button. I saved this screen, so I'm going to save this. And now I'm going to connect up to my remote unit here. I have that already set up kind of off screen. I have that sitting here waiting with the remote agent, and that was covered in a previous video. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's see if I can do this. I'm going to connect up to this, and now I'm going to go ahead and go here to project, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in my right folder here, which I am. I'm going to go ahead and download this, and which I've done previously, but I want to make sure everything is up to the latest. I'm going to go ahead and click run, and at this point I'm going to pull this down into view, and you can see that here's the previous screens that we created. Here's the animation overview. And now what I should be able to do is double check to make sure that these are working here. So I have xval, yval, and rotate. And now set all those back to 0. I should be able to click on this and it increments that by 1. Well, what happens when I hold this button down? It increments on the press, but it doesn't do anything special on while it's being held down or when I release it. So let's go ahead and change that. Let me pull this off screen here. And I can say OK here, and notice that this still stays connected. I'll go back into my animation overview. And what I'll do now is on the on while, notice here that there's a little asterisk up here. That means that there's something configured in that tab. So right now the on while and on up don't have that little asterisk. That just helps you see what's if there's anything in there, so you don't have to open those tabs up. What we're going to do now is in the on while, I'm going to take that same concept here, and instead of adding 1 xval, I'm going to take xval and add 5 to it while it's pressed. But there's something here to notice. We can expand this by saying, clicking on the config button here, and that'll expand this and give us a little bit more options here. So when that opens up, we'll see. Did I click on it here? Oh, I'm sorry, didn't click on it apparently. I can see that I have that xval plus 5, but there's this rate, and this is in milliseconds. So by default, it's going to be 250 milliseconds, and it's going to go ahead and increase that. So notice there's an asterisk there now, and so when I press it, it's going to do this. While I'm holding it, it's going to add 5 to it. And I've got the options to put keys in there. We'll cover the rest of this stuff in a more detailed video. So now at this point, I can save this. Now what this is going to do is prompt me, do I want to download this to the target unit? I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to eventually disable this so that it doesn't pop up all the time. So now that's automatically downloaded there. And now when I increment this, you can see here it's still going up by 1 as I click it, but if I hold it down, it goes up by 5 until I release it, and then click individually, so you can see how that works. So that might want to put a nice little up arrow on there and do the same thing with a decrement, and so you can see how you can do that. So there's some quick ways to do that. And then lastly, one of the things that you could do is combine all of these. They don't have to be the same type. So for example, these first ones were the built-in language, and then maybe I do some things there, but then on up, maybe I open a screen. So I can mix and match these different types. So each of these tabs can have different types. So maybe even on up, instead of doing the built-in scripting, I can do VB script here. So you can see how each one of those could be a different type there. Let's see. One of the things I wanted to point out too is this is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but let's say for example the command to open a screen. We'll just say open here, and now then I'll go to the command. That's the same thing as applying this command animation up here. We just made it nice and convenient here. Now if we change this to the open screen, now what we did previously in the navigation is we either typed in here the name of the screen on those buttons, or we chose the name of the screen from this list, which is what I recommend. And what you can do is you can put a string tag in here, a string type tag inside of curly brackets. Let's call this change screen, and we'll make this again a string type tag, and then this will allow us to put whatever string we want to that matches these screen names, and then open that up. Now previously in the active objects videos we covered for example the combo box. So what I'll do is I'll just take this, and in the label field here we want to use that change screen. So I'm going to pull this from my object finder here by double clicking on that field, and then in the data sources we're going to set some static sources. I'm going to put some of these screens in here. So let's put in main, and they don't have to be in any particular order unless you want it to be, I should say, or they will be in the order that you type them in here. And then let's maybe go to the active objects screen, and that has to be spelled exactly like these are. And then maybe we also give, let's see, what's another one, main. We'll go to active objects too, I guess. So they don't have to have all the screens in there. This is just providing an example. So what this is going to do is when I drop this drop down and I choose from that list, it will put the name of that screen from that data source in the tag called change screen, and then what we'll do is we'll use this button here to open the screen, but then feed that in through that string tag. So let's see if this works. Let's go ahead and save this, and then that's automatically downloaded. So now I should be able to have those in there, and I guess I need to make that a little bit wider, but you'll get the point here. If I want to go to the main screen, now I click open. Why did it go to the main screen? Let's see. I can go to the main screen there. So I take main, I click open, and I wonder why it didn't go. So let's try to figure out. If I go into here, change screen, and I wonder if I have to stop the application in this case and rerun it because of the way that the data sources are. So let's give that a try, see if that was the case. Most of the time you don't have to do that, but sometimes you do. So now let's go here, let's pick another one of these, come back here and click open. Nope, that didn't do it either. Interesting. So let's see what the value of change screen is. And right now change screen doesn't have anything in it. I wonder why. Oh, you know what? I made, let's see, I don't know if I stopped the application. Let me re-download because I made changes to the tags database, so that might be the case. So now let's go ahead and run this. And we'll bring this back up on screen. And that has main in there. Yeah, that was it, because I made changes to the tag database, so that's why. Okay, so you can see that now I can go to Active Objects, and then Active Objects 2, and again back to main. Alright, that gives us some ideas. So the next thing that I want to do is talk about the hyperlink animation. Now the hyperlink animation, again, I'm going to put this on a button, but it doesn't have to be on a button. It could be on a rectangle or anything like that. The hyperlink animation basically allows you to apply that here, allows you to use these different types of hyperlinks. So it could be, what's commonly thought of as be an HTTP link, maybe to a web page or an HTML file on your local hard drive, a secure version of that. You can open up Mail to, which will open up the default mail program on that PC. I need to mention also that if you do HTTP and you point it to a website, it will open up the default web browser on that PC. So whether that's Explorer, Internet Explorer, Firefox, or Chrome, or whatever that default browser is, it will open that. And you don't have to choose this type. If you choose other based on the file, based on the URL in here, it will do that. So let's give this an example. Let's go back to the button here and label this button. We'll go to wonderware.com. And back on the command, I'm sorry, on the hyperlink here, we'll put in here www.wonderware.com. Alright, so now again, this will open up the default web browser. And I need to make this button a little bit wider here, change the font. Let's go ahead and save that again. And now when I pull this down in, again, this is a remote desktop connection to remote PC that I have that's running. So let's go ahead and click on that, and you'll see that it's opened up Internet Explorer, and it's gone to the, in this case, the Invensys website, which is where wonderware.com points to. So you can see how that works. You can also see that this is not embedded in the application. We'll do that when we get to the other objects. For example, ActiveX, we can embed a web browser right in the application. So this launched Internet Explorer. Alternatively, we can, let's say, go to a file. So let me get this off screen. And let's say that I make a text file. Let's just create a notepad here. So this is a test. It could be a training manual, PDF, could be some kind of help file, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save this in my project folder. So let's see, where's my project folder? And in this case, what I did at the beginning is I created a folder here under the C drive. I created InTouch Machine Edition projects and InTouch Machine Edition training. So I'm going to save it right there in my project folder, and we'll call this hyperlink test.text. And so then that's in my project folder now. What I can do is I can put a button here, and we'll call this text file. Could be a PDF, could be a lot of different things. And the hyperlink animation, if we put in here the hyperlink test.txt, I'm not sure it will find that. So what I'm going to do is use one of the built-in scripting languages, built-in scripting function, and we'll go ahead and show you this here in the tag expression field. Get app path and open and close parenthesis. Now what this will do is this will point you to where the project is. In this case, on my hard drive on my laptop, it's here, but when it's running on the remote PC, it will report back where it's running. So I need to do that inside of curly brackets, get app path, and I need to open and close the parentheses in case there was any parameters in there, and then I'll close the curly brackets. If you notice here, it does end, so it's ITME training backslash. It does end with a backslash, so I don't have to add that in there. And now when I'm going to save this, and because I saved my text file in the project folder, I'm going to download this whole thing again. I could choose just to download that one folder or one file if I wanted to. And then when I run this, let's see, and I didn't stop it. I don't know if I need to stop it or not. I'm going to hit the text file. It automatically associates a notepad with the text file and then opens that up. So that again could be a PDF if you have whatever file associations on that PC. So for example, if Adobe Acrobat is installed, if it's a PDF, it would automatically associate that with Adobe Acrobat or whatever you've set up on that particular PC. So there's some ideas of the hyperlink that could be used with PDF manuals, training manuals, HTML files, could be launch videos, things of that nature. And by using a string tag in there, you could dynamically go to web pages. So you could, like we did with that drop down with a screen list, you could pick from a list of let's say web pages or help files and then choose to go to those too. Let's move these buttons over a little bit, give us some room here on screen. And then the next animation is the bar graph. Now, there's no bar graph object. What we have to do is place an object, and most commonly it's going to be a rectangle, but it doesn't have to be. We can get that bar graph animation on rounded rectangles, lots of different, it's more or less a fill type. Let me go ahead and delete this. Animation, so it fills. So here I'm going to have this bar graph, and I'm going to apply, it's a rectangle, and I'm going to apply the bar graph animation to it. And here I'm going to put in the Y value, and that's already set up to go from 0 to 100. Now this extra stuff in here for min and max, that's just a carryover from when we did symbols, and you don't need to keep all that stuff in there. We could just set this from 0 to 100 in here and it'll behave the same. It's going to change this foreground color. Let's just go ahead and make that green, make it a little bit nicer, because green means good, and it'll grow up in a vertical direction. So let's go ahead and give that a try. If we save this, and I believe I'm already using the Y value, so I don't have to re-download. And I should be able to bring this in from off screen, change the Y value, and you can see there the bar graph grows. Now let's again, this is just an overview. We're going to get a little bit more in depth when we start talking about details of the animations, but we're going to go ahead and apply a color animation to this. Now this is the rectangle with the bar graph applied to it, and then we'll change the colors here. So let's say that this limit expression, I'll tell you what, I for some reason I always miss this field. I always go right for the change limits, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and put that Y value in here. It does not have to be that same tag. It could be independent. So you could change the colors based on something other than what's setting the level of that bar graph. In this case I'm going to keep it the same. So let's say that maybe from 0 to 33 it's green, and then it changes yellow, and then at 66 it changes to red. And now if you need more than these 4, you can click on more and you can get up to 16, and if you need more than that, we'll cover this in the detail video, you can do by color and then set a red, green, and blue value in here, or a decimal value of a 1 of 16 million colors. So a lot you can get at. So between 0 and 33 it's going to be green, 33 to 66 it'll be yellow, and then it'll change red. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Let's save that. And now you can see I left that in a state. So here you got green to yellow to red, and then in the detail video we'll see about how we can stack those on top of each other and get different colors and remain, let's say the green, the yellow, and the red can remain in view. But this is the overview video. So let's see, the next one might be position. So let's move this out of the way. Let's just take an ellipse here, or a circle, put this on the screen, and what I'm going to do is use the X and the Y value to move it around a little bit. So let's set the position animation on here, and let's start by moving this horizontally. So what I'll do is I'll do the X value, and notice that that's not case sensitive. So this slider slides from 0 to 100 value, so that value range 0 to 100, and I'll position it 0 to 100 pixels. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. Let's say, in fact, let's even bump this up 0 to 200, and I should be able to save this. I didn't add any tags, so when I move this X value, you can see that when I move this 0 to 100, it moves 200 pixels back and forth. I didn't set anything up on the Y value, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and apply that. So that's notice that the reason I did that is so you can see that these are independent from each other. So let's do Y val, and maybe this one will go from 0 to 100 in the value, but this one only goes 0 to 50 in position. So let's give that a try. Save that. Go back to the runtime, and you can see that that goes only a little bit of distance compared to this. But wait a minute, on this X value, when I move the slider to the right, the object moves to the right, but in the Y value, when I move the slider down, the object goes up. Why is that the case? Well, let's go back to the PowerPoint. If we remember, we set up our navigation and our header, things like this, but here's the reference point. Up in the upper corner is 0, 0, and X increases in this direction and Y increases in a downward direction. So what we need to do here is adjust for that. And how we're going to do that, let's see. If we go back into the development environment here, and instead of making this go 0 to 50, let's bump this up here. Let's go 0 to 100. But we want it to go negative. So we want to move it negative 100 pixels when the range, so that it goes upward when we slide the slider upward. So the reason I do it this way, and you can flip some things around, is the value remains intact. It's just the position that goes in the right orientation. So let's give that a try here. Let's go ahead and save this and bring this back into view here. So now when I slide this, and now it's going a little bit further than that 50 pixels, it goes in the same orientation as the slider goes. Okay. Now by default, the object is kind of a read, or the position animation is kind of a read-only. It does not allow you to drag this around, but that's very easy to change. What I can do is just go in here and just click on this slider and enable that, and now when I save this, I bring this into view here, now I can change it with these. So this could be representing value coming from the PLC, or I can actually now grab a hold of it and move this around on the screen. But because I have both X and Y, you can see that I can move it in really any position between 0 to 100 and 0 to 200, depending on the, I'm sorry, 0 to 100 because that's the value. It's the pixels goes to 200. But you can see that I can slide it anywhere in there. It's not restrained. Now, when we make these sliders, which we'll get into when we talk about symbols, let's just go ahead and give you the basic idea of how to make a slider. If I grab a rectangle here and just make the little handle that we would slide up and down, and if I apply the position animation to it, I only want that to go vertically, so I'll set that to the Y val. And again, I need to go this, change this to -100. I'll enable that slider, and at that point, see, did I put that? I did put that value in there. At that point, it's going to act like a slider. Now we could put a scale on it, put some numbers on it, and everything like that. So let's go back to our runtime here, and you can see that I can now just made my own little slider that's very similar to that. Again, I can put a scale on that and everything. So the next thing would be resize. So if we go to resize here, and again, get these out of the way here. If I go to graphics and resize, oh, first I need an object. So let's put just an object on the screen here. The closed polygon gives us kind of the best look and feel. And I will fill this so you can get a good idea. Now the resize animation, let's put that on there, allows us to change the height and the width of the object independently. And so let's go here and change the height of this based on Y val. And if I change this from 0 to 100, it's going to be 0 to 100% of its height. Now I might not want this to go to 0% because that would actually disappear. So let's make this 10% in both of these cases. And I'll set this width at the X val. And notice the reference is the top and the left. If I go ahead and save this, and notice that when I come in here that I can reduce the size of this object. Basically when it's at 0, 0 here, now it's at 10%, and if I go 100%, you can see that I can get that object. But notice that it's growing in relation to, or changing the size in relation to that top left reference point. That'll become a little bit more apparent as we go in here. And let's say that I wanted to make this grow from the center, let's say. Now when I change this, it grows from the center up and down and outward. And we'll go back, we're going to talk about the rotation here in a second, and we'll bring that up. Let's see. Let's go ahead now. And oh, you know, one of the things that I missed was the visibility. Let's bring this object back into play here, and here under the position animation there's an additional animation called visibility. Now what this does is when this evaluates to true, it makes it visible. When it evaluates to false, it gets rid of the object, and that's important to understand. So for example, if I change this to Y val is greater than or equal to 10, when it's greater than or equal to 10, it will be visible. So let's go ahead and run this. And it's kind of off screen over here, so you can see that when the Y value is greater than 10, let me use this slider, move it down, and when it gets 10, it's still visible. Less than 10, it goes away. It's gone. There is no more object there. It's hidden. Not hidden, but it's just gone. So for example, the reason I'm pointing this out is if I pull this down and now that object is gone, there's no more object to grab, so it's not there anymore. So just understand how that works. So let's move along to the other animations here. We'll go into doing the rotation, and then we'll come back to the text data link in a minute. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this same object that we used for the resize, and I'm going to copy it, and let me get the other one out of the way here. And now what I'm going to do is remove the resize animation and add a rotation animation to this. Now also what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the shape a little bit here to illustrate a point. Now when we rotate, I'm going to use this rotate tag here, And when we rotate an object, we have to give it the tag. In this case, it's the ROT tag. So let me go ahead and come in here to the Object Finder, and let me type the letter R, and it'll filter that. So notice that it filtered right on rotate there, or ROT. I'm going to have a value from 0 to 100, and I'm going to rotate from 0 to 360 degrees. You can go negative, so I can go negative 90 to plus 90, so I can put in some different ranges here. But the reason why I changed the shape of this object is to point out this reference, this top left, and here's the different choices you have. Now what this does is this top left references the topmost, kind of a bounding rectangle around this. So for example, I'm just going to do something here just to give you a reference point. I'm going to group this object, even though it's a single object, I'm going to group it, and that'll show you that this bounding box around here is this top left is right here. So when I rotate this, and I'm going to ungroup this because you probably wouldn't do that normally. When I rotate this, it's going to rotate around that top left point. So if I go ahead and save this, and I didn't add any tags here. If I bring this back into view and I change the slide there, rotate, notice that it's rotating around this top left point here that's kind of off in space. If I wanted to rotate that around, let's say, the center, I could pick the center as a reference point. And now when I save this, bring this back into view here, it rotates around the center. Now that's not kind of a the center weighted part of that. That's the center of that bounding box. So it doesn't matter if you've got more of the object down in this corner. It's not a center of gravity of that. It's more of the center of where that is, height and width wise. Now let me go ahead and change this back to top left, and I'm going to put this back to kind of the original shape that it was, which would be this five-sided figure. And so the reason I'm doing this is, let's say that you wanted to rotate around this point. Just what I do is kind of a nice little trick is I click on the object and I see where its location is. So it's 301, 200 if I want to put it back there. And then what I do is I tuck it all the way up here in this upper corner. If I change the tab to format here, I can see that I'm at 0, 0. The reason I'm doing that is that's referencing that top left as the reference point, and then I can go here under advanced and I can put in the point. Well, how do I get that point? If I have this object selected, it tells me the height and width of that object. But if I click off into space here in this white space, then it shows me the position of my cursor. If I put my cursor right about that point, I can see that it's roughly 44, 114. If I click on the object, I can see that it's actually 115 pixels tall, but that point is roughly 44, 115. So now what I can do is, using that top left as a reference point, I can put in here 44, 115. Now I can move that back to the location that it was. So here under format, I can say, okay, that was at 301, 200. That'll put it back to where it was, and now it will reference off of that one little point. So let's go ahead and give that a try and see if what I said makes sense. All right, so it references that center point. So that's a nice little trick on how you can get the point of rotation. So move it up in that corner, make sure your reference is the top left. That'll be that upper corner, and then offset it. Notice it says offset, so that's why that says that. So okay, the next thing that we wanted to do is, let's see, so some examples of why you would use that. The needle of a meter could be a wind turbine, a fan, or an impeller, or a blower could show that. So there's some uses there. So let's now go ahead and do the text data link. Now the text data link, notice that that's not highlighted on most of these objects. In fact, all of these objects don't have the text data link. That has to be on a text object. And if we put just a plain text object, let's say this is temperature, notice that the text data link is not enabled. That doesn't get enabled until we have a special character in the text, which is the pound sign. So as soon as I put one pound sign, you can see that that becomes available. If I remove the pound sign, it goes away. If I add the pound sign, it goes in there. So let's, I believe I talked about the text object a little bit and the text data link when we were talking about active objects. By default, the text object with no pound signs in it is just kind of a basic text. It's just a label. There's no animation applied to it. As soon as I add a pound sign into the caption, I can get at that text data link. Alternatively, instead of getting at the text data link here, if I just have the caption and I click on this button here, which is text data link, which is similar to this, what it does is applies the text data link. It also inserts a colon, a space, and 4 pound signs in there, and then allows me to put, let's just do rotate. It allows me to put a tag name in there. So it's automatically inserted the colon, the space, and the 4 pound signs in there and applied that for me. So now when I download this, what you can see here is now I have that tag, and you can see the value goes from 0 to 100, and it's made that very easy to do. Let's see, whoops, I got this running here in another frame. Let's stop that. Alternatively, maybe I don't want the label and I can just put pound signs in there. Then I can apply that text data link to that, and also I can have the input enabled, and we'll talk a bit about that in the detailed video. So here I can have the minimum, the maximum, and it'll automatically keep me within those bounds, and I can do some other things in there. Again, we'll talk about those in the detailed videos, but we can also format this, whether we want this to show a hex value, a binary value, or automatic. And let's see, so back to text. Another thing that I'll often do here, and this is more on the object, I think I showed this in the video about the text active object, but you can put the background around it, put a border around it, make it a little bit easier to find on the screen. And there's also things when we have the input enabled, we can actually get at this tab order, and that'll change the order as you tab around the screen. So there's some ideas there. Now another thing to point out, let me get rid of this tab order here, is when we have the input enabled, you may want a pop-up keyboard on the screen. So this virtual keyboard here, notice that this is disabled. First I have to enable it in my entire project. So I have to go here to Project, Viewer, and turn on the virtual keyboard. Now this default keypad is chosen, and what you should choose here is if you have more numeric entries, you should choose keypad. If you have more alphanumeric keypad, you should choose this as the default. But let's say that we want to choose the keypad as the default. Then what we can do is now I can use the default, and that will be the numeric keypad, or I can choose for each instance of a text object, I can choose if I want this to be alphanumeric or keypad. In this case I'm going to use the default. And now when I do this, if I save this, I don't think I have to restart my runtime. We'll find out here in a second. If I click on this, I must have to. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop. And I'm not sure if I have to download, but let's go ahead and do that. It's fairly quick to do. And we'll go ahead and run the project again. I'll make sure I have that as input enabled. I do. And bring this back on screen. Go to the animation overview, and now when I click on it, it brings up the numeric keypad, and you can see that. So why does that still have pound signs in there? I'm not sure. Let's see. Oh, the reason is because I didn't keep my tag in there. So let's go ahead and there we go. Save that. A little bit of troubleshooting here on the fly as well. So now I can put in a value, let's say 22, say OK to that, and it changes that ROT value. So let's see, I think that's everything that I wanted to cover in the animation overview. And virtual keypad input enabled. And let's go back to the PowerPoint, make sure I covered everything. I think I did. If you need some more resources, you have these links available to you here. And we thank you for your time. Hopefully you learned something, and check us out in the next video. Thanks. Have a good day.